Welcome everyone to the 2024 Talking Cardboard Board Game Championship Bracket Madness. For this event, the Talking Cardboard crew will be dividing up 64 games into 8 different categories that we feel best typifies board games in general. Once the brackets are developed, we will be allowing the community to vote on the head-to-head matchups until only one game remains in each bracket. Those games will then create the lineup for the Talking Cardboard Championship Series. The crew throughout the rest of the year will be playing these games to determine which one of us is the premier board game player. Today, we will be focusing on the TCG, LCG, CCG category, as well as the hand management and deck building categories. We will be taking the nominees and seeding them into the brackets as well. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the madness. Welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, John, and today I'm joined by this panel of top board game analysts to discuss these nominees and seed these brackets. My expertise, I'd say, lies in tile placement. I love that genre, and simple is better, and yeah, I'll leave it at that. Let's start here on my left with our analysts.
Hi, my name is Corey, and I am most excited about the categories for deck building and worker placement. Most of the games in my collection consist of those style of games, so I'm really excited to get to talking about those.
Great to have you here, Corey. I know worker placement's going to be definitely a hot topic when we get there.
Yep.
I'm Ryan. I think area control and deck building are my two favorite categories. Just always gravitate towards those two games the most, I think.
Hey everyone, my name's Nick, and the category I'm most excited for is war games because that's the type of game that really got me into the hobby in the first place, and to this day it's definitely one of the types of games I enjoy playing the most and own the most of. So
great, thanks Nick. I know we'll be relying on your expertise when we get to the war game category.
Yes, sir.
And I'm Dirch. I like card games and deck builders, but I'm most excited to see us build these regions, these brackets, and then figure out what games are kind of sleepers when it comes time for all of us describing our games, and then when it's the fan vote.
Great to have your expertise here, Dirch. I know you're really into the March Madness thing, so this will be perfect to have you on the show. With that, let's get right into the nominees for the T.C.B.G.C, LCG category. Dirch, what do you have for us?
This year's nominees for the T.C.B.G.C Living Card Game, Collectible Card Game, and Trading Card Game category are the following. Magic the Gathering, Richard Garfield, Wizards of the Coast. Star Wars Unlimited, Daniel Schaefer, Fantasy Flight Games. World of Warcraft Trading Card Game, Upper Deck, and Cryptozoic. Soulforge Fusion, Richard Garfield and Justin Gary, and Stoneblade Entertainment. Disney Lorcana, Ryan Miller, Steve Warner, Ravensburger. Pokemon, Nintendo, and Wizards of the Coast. Keyforge, Richard Garfield, and Fantasy Flight Games. Lord of the Rings, the card game, Nate French, Fantasy Flight Games. Game of Thrones, the card game, Nate French, Eric Lang, Christian T. Peterson, Fantasy Flight Games. Android Netrunner, Richard Garfield, Lucas Litzinger, Fantasy Flight Games. Marvel Champions, Michael Boggs, Nate French, Caleb Grace, Fantasy Flight Games. Arkham Horror, Nate French, Maxine Juniper Newman, Matthew Newman, Fantasy Flight Games. And those are your nominations for the massive card game category. Let's go back to the table and see their thoughts.
Thanks again, Dirch. Let's really dive into these card games. Corey, is there anything that really stands out to you amongst these nominees, games you don't think belong here?
I'm just surprised at how wide of a category this is. We got some ancient games, some really old games on the list here, and some brand new games that haven't even been released yet. So I'm excited to see how this, how we fight about it, I guess.
Church, what do you think? Are there any games that jump out that maybe should be cut from this, you don't think are contenders for this Champion Series bracket?
Well, it's very interesting because we've got 12 games in this category, and we are cutting it down to 8, so 4 have to go. And when we're looking at qualifications that might get a game cut, I think that games that are, like Corey said, some ancient older games, that might work against them in this bracket, because if it's a little out of sight, out of mind, then we might not have them in our top 8.
Yeah, no, that makes 100% sense. And I think going the other way on that, just thinking to cross one off here, or get one into the bracket easily, like, I think we can all agree a game like Magic the Gathering, that is a foundational centerpiece of the card game community. I don't know, is there any arguments against that making it to the bracket and most likely being our number 1 seed?
Do we have to be good at the game in order for us to want it in the bracket? All right, then it's a shoo-in.
Yeah, I think also it's hard to understate the value of Magic the Gathering to the hobby itself, because that's the game that brings a lot of people to game stores to buy Magic cards, and then they're going to see other board games in the hobby that we have no idea over the years how much value that it has brought to the hobby, but I would like to think that over the years a lot of people got into board gaming because they went to a friendly local game store to buy Magic cards and saw something else there that got them into playing board games.
Ryan, are there any other games that stand out kind of as those cornerstones of the genre that you really think should make it into this category?
For me, I think Lord of the Rings, the card game, is a staple that's also been around for sure a decade, maybe more like 15 years at this point. Just got revised and updated again last year or a year and a half ago at this point. That'd be high on my list for sure.
And I will say the selection committee did have multiple selections of this game. I think that's a valid point to leave it in.
The only thing I haven't figured out with that yet is it's a cooperative game, so how we're going to distinguish who the winners are of it will be interesting, and I'm kind of on board with you.
Maybe add some flair to the tournament as a whole. We might have multiple people getting points off that game, depending if they can foil the evil forces' plans.
There is a point system in that game.
Perfect, even better.
Okay.
Then that'll make it a little easier. We can actually determine a winner and some points to give out there.
All right, I think we need to start narrowing down some games we can cross off this list for our bracket of 8. Magic is in for sure. Mm-hmm. Are we leaning towards the Lord of the Rings one as well, that is kind of a quintessential one?
I would say that's going to be a good one to have in there.
Okay.
Not sure quite on the seeding yet, but I would argue, yeah.
Are there any that we can cross out from this list? Any that are more pretenders that wouldn't quite make the top 8?
I'll say I nominate this game, but seeing the list, I think it probably does not belong, and that's the WoW TCG. It just was not around that long. It was fun for what it was, but certainly doesn't stand up to a ton of these games.
Now, to build off of that, I actually liked that game, and I thought about putting it on my list as well. It's a fun, it's got a lot of unique mechanics, but I do think the shelf life was a little bit short for that game, so that might knock it out of this top 8 here.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because with that WoW TCG, I only learned about it a couple weeks ago when I came over to John's. Or John was the one that I think brought it up, and it was like the Hearthstone game, right? Or based off the Hearthstone. Or Hearthstone was based off...
Hearthstone came out of the WoW TCG, which was based off Magic the Gathering.
Oh, okay. But, yes, and I had heard of Hearthstone, the PC game, before, and I never really realized it did come out of like a trading card game. So, unfortunately... I agree that it's maybe not withstood the test of time, but something I personally might get into, even though it's maybe not worthy of the nomination.
Yeah, and to counter that with the exact opposite argument, Pokemon was a staple for a generation or two.
Yes.
In a lot of people's hearts.
And arguably still might be.
Still might be.
Although I would argue maybe it's more of a collector's hobby nowadays.
And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to, I don't know if any of you guys put Pokemon on the list as well, or if I was the only one, but that was one of the reasons why I wanted it to get made or make it into the bracket, is because growing up, all I did was collect the cards. I never really played the game, and I kind of wanted to revisit it and learn how to play again and see how competitive it really can be. So
I should mention, there are several games on here that the selection committee had multiple nominations, including Pokemon, Soulforge Fusion, Lord of the Rings, the card game. Are there any reason someone can think of that those should be knocked out?
Well, with Pokemon, it was the reason we just mentioned that were people just getting the game as a collector item more than to play competitively, and that was how I was as a kid. We only collected the cards, never learned how to play the game, until very recently I got one of the 2-player starter kits just to learn the game and play it, and I was disappointed at how the game actually is not as competitive as I would have thought it would be because of the high level Pokemon you can just have in your deck right away, and they maybe over the years broken the game down than maybe what it originally was. But that was my initial feeling, as this feels more of like a fun light kids game, but not the depth that I actually kind of would have otherwise thought it might have.
I think one more thing to factor in here is community popularity. Is Pokemon just have too much spotlight on it that it would be a travesty not to include it in our bracket?
I think it needs to be included in any bracket we're talking about card games, but if we're thinking of a voting system, I don't know how passionate the fan base would be, so that might be, in a head-to-head vote, it might get upset by a game that is maybe newer on the list, say something like Lorcana or the Star Wars Unlimited game, where it doesn't have the history or foundation, or it's not as influential to people as it was formative for a lot of us, but more people actually are actively playing that game. So I think it deserves to be in, but that could be one that would be ripe for an upset.
Right. Which is a valid counter argument. I could see it going either way, to be real honest.
Yeah, I was gonna say the opposite. That
I think if we're thinking it's on the bubble, I think, the current expansions or sets for Pokemon right now just don't lead it to be a thrilling contender for a board game championship series, and maybe that's reason enough to cut it out this time and see how it performs next year.
Can we keep it on the fence for a little bit?
I think that one's on the bubble.
All right, we'll keep that one on the bubble.
It got 2 nominations. I think that means that a fair amount of the committee values
We're
its
also
place.
underestimating the Pokerap.
The Pokerap, which we will play while we play it. Quick here, we got 3 more games to chop out. I would argue we maybe only want 1 or 2 LCGs.
That's fair.
So what are the options there then?
Between Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, and Arkham Horror. I would say the Lord of the Rings is probably the one with the most staying power.
Yeah, I mean, I did nominate all 3 of those. I would say of those, Lord of the Rings has been my favorite and is still currently my favorite. Arkham Horror, I think, for the same reason that we would say Pokemon and the Magic should be in, that one should be in. It is just so popular. There's so much content. It's been played for many years and is still played a lot. Game of Thrones, the card game, I don't know a lot of other people that played it. It is a very fun card game. I don't think that they're making it anymore, or if they are, that surprised me because that's also been around a long time. But yeah, if we're only doing 1 or 2 of them, that's probably the
How do we feel about Keyforge on here? That one came out hot, but I know it's kind of dropped off the map and been replaced by other newer, hotter games. I don't know if that's quite made the cut for this year.
Can you have a Keyforge with a Soulforge in the same room? I don't know. Or would it be fun to explore both again?
Well, those 2 are vastly different games.
They are.
And we don't have time to go deep into the numbers on it.
But their names are similar.
Yes, in that they have similar letters, yes.
And Richard Garfield is the designer for both?
He was a consultant on both, yes.
Consultant on both.
Yes. So Keyforge, I think it did come out hot. It was actually a very Minnesota-based game with Game Center, or what was the original publishing company with that?
Fantasy Flight Games?
Fantasy Flight Games, yeah. But then, over the years in the pandemic, that game kind of went through some struggles, and it's on its way back, but I think that is definitely on the bubble, if not getting chopped, because I don't know how passionate people are on the committee about this game, and if we're looking to cut, I think that one that might be more towards the bottom.
Yep, I would agree with that. I just don't think it's performed and met the requirements to get into this year's bracket, unfortunately.
I think collectively as a group we play Soulforge more often, so I think we'd probably lean more toward that if we were to pick out of the 2.
Yep.
So, yeah.
And that leaves us with one final cut of a bubble team here.
Well, I'll go out on a limb and say for me, Lorcana would be out. I have not played it a ton, admittedly, but I really have not enjoyed it.
That one's hard. That one's been a hot newcomer to the scene. I think it's proven itself in the competitive arena at least. I don't know, Church, what are your thoughts?
I do play Lorcana. I think that it's not a staple of the card gaming community and industry, but it is a very exciting, relatively new card game, and it has a very passionate backing, and there have been multiple sets that have been released by this time, so I would give that the edge over the Star Wars Unlimited if we're pitting two head-to-head right now for thinking which one should be in, which one should be out, because as of this recording, the Star Wars Unlimited game isn't even out yet.
However, we know it's going to make a splash.
Yes, it will, but how do we don't know. We know that Lorcana's been very popular at
True.
Gen Con, PAX Sun.
We could see Star Wars Unlimited in the 2025 brackets once it's proven its mettle.
Yes.
Well, that wasn't too bad. We were able to cut down to 8 teams. The remaining 8 games are Magic the Gathering, Soulforge Fusion, Lorcana, Pokemon, Lord of the Rings, the card game, Android Netrunner, Marvel Champions, and Arkham Horror. I think we've unanimously agreed that Magic the Gathering has proven its mettle throughout the years, deserves the 1 seed. Now you really get into that grindy position of ranking these other games. I guess if I was going to go one way, I don't know a ton about Marvel Champions. I don't know if anyone else does. That just seems like a weaker game in the bracket as a whole to me. But if anyone has thoughts on some of the games that maybe should be in the top half versus the lower half, I'd be interested to hear. Maybe we'll start with Corey.
I haven't played a whole lot of LCG, so I don't have like a strong opinion. What else made it? So it was Lord of the Rings LCG, Marvel Champions. Was that it in the LCG category, pretty much?
Arkham Horror.
And Arkham Horror LCG.
Android Netrunner is, you could argue, is an LCG as well.
And that made the list so far?
Mm-hmm.
And Android's another one of those games where I think it was really hot. I don't know if the competitive scene still exists or if it's
The
top
game
2
was
game.
discontinued, and so that kind of cut the competitive scene, but it is still, it's still played.
Sure. Maybe a lower half bracket for this year due to the cooling off of that nominee.
I would say, yeah, probably the least amount of people have played Android Netrunner. I've tried to play it. It's a very complex game too, so I think it's a high barrier to entry for a lot of people to play. So, and like Ryan said, it has been a dead game for a while. So I think that should be a little bit lower. Arkham Horror, LCG, I've never played. So I put Lord of the Rings higher than that.
How about Pokemon? With the popularity of that game, does that feel like it should be a strong 2 seed in this bracket?
Looking at these, we all have to come to a consensus on what we think the rankings of these are. Magic, Arkham Horror, Pokemon, those ones have been foundational for the genres. And they're longitudinal, so it's old, but they're still relevant now. So I think that those 3 probably have to be the top 3 seeds.
Brian, what do you think? Arkham Horror, Pokemon?
Oh, which one is the number 2 of those? I would say Arkham Horror, just because I've played that the most of all those.
Yeah,
I agree.
I have no strong
feelings
feelings either way. Nick?
I'm fine with that. Like I said, was frustrated with the Pokemon design as of today, so I'm not going to argue.
So are you feeling that should slip out of the top 3?
I was going to say it's 8. We've already put it at top 3, so I'm not going to open up that can of worms. I'm fine putting it at the top 3.
I think the popularity of the game just...
It is popular.
It's too hard
It's
to
withstood the
let
test of time.
aside.
It's been
Yeah.
around forever.
Yeah.
I'm not going to deny the impact it's had on the world
Yes.
of TCGs.
Yeah.
So,
It has been impactful. It's got a very good resume in terms of this committee here, but it's also ripe for an upset.
and I'm also very pro original 150 Pokemon, right?
Yes.
Oh,
And-
who isn't?
Yeah, so
I think we're all in our 30s here,
Yeah,
so we're
So-
maybe biased.
that's also
Yeah.
part of my...
Yes.
But
Now we have some really interesting games left over here for the middle of the bracket. Soulforge Fusion, I'm looking at you, Church.
Yep.
Lorcana, Lord of the Rings, the card game, Android Netrunner, Marvel Champions. As I mentioned earlier, I think we're looking at Lord of the Rings, Soulforge, Lorcana in these next set of seeding. Any thoughts, Church, on what are strong contenders for 4 or 5?
Well, I think it comes down to Lorcana and Soulforge Fusion. Personally, I've got a little bit of bias towards Soulforge Fusion because they have, in the very near future, actually, they are having more regional events. A pre-release event is happening in St. Paul, Minnesota, that I am heading up and kind of organizing. So I think that makes it a strong contender for when votes would come in to possibly be supporting this game. They've got a third set that's coming out Q1, Q2 of this year. So I think that puts them in this mid-range. Lorcana is coming with a huge head of steam. It's got Disney behind it. So I think those two there, I could go either way between those two. And Lord of the Rings, personally I think falls to like that number 6 line in this region.
I think I would agree with that. Soulforge Fusion and Lorcana have made big splashes this year. Soulforge also got multiple nominations by the selection committee. I don't see how that could not be our 4th seed for this one. And then maybe Lorcana at 5 just because of the waves that it's made this year.
Mm-hmm.
So that leaves us with Lord of the Rings, the card game, Android Netrunner, Marvel Champions, which I think if I was doing this, I would go 6, 7, 8 in that order.
Yeah, same.
Lord of the Rings being more popular, Android Netrunner being a major influence in the card game scene, but kind of dying off lately, and then Marvel Champions also kind of being a lesser-known newcomer to the scene.
I would flip Android Netrunner, though, in Marvel, because at the end of the day, Android Netrunner is out of print, where Marvel is continuing to print, I believe, new expansion content, as far as I'm aware. And then I agree with Lord of the Rings above those two because they just did the revised core edition, which shows that it's withstood the test of time to the point where they wanted to reinfuse life back into the game by creating a revised core set, which was so.
All right, there you have it. The 2024 TCG, LCG, CCG final bracket. I just want to quick see what people's thoughts are on what might be the most interesting current matchup out of the first round or potential future matchup, and also see who you think is going to come out of this bracket on top. Ryan, I'm going to start with you.
I think 1 versus 8 is a lock. Magic will take that. Then 2-7? Yeah, Arkham Horror should beat Marvel. 6-4? That's a tough one. I would vote Lord of the Rings. To be fair, sorry, Church, but
Yeah,
then it starts to get murky. 6-3 Pokemon.
Yeah.
For me, Lord of the Rings should be Pokemon. It's for one a much better
Who do you
game.
see coming out of the bracket?
Overall, I think Magic will win. But
Corey, what are your thoughts? Any surprise upsets you think will be coming up?
I think Lorcana is going to take it. Yeah, I think it's going to take.
I think that's a bold
thing.
pick.
Yeah,
But it is popular right now. It's making a splash. I don't know. Nick, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think this will also be interesting for understanding our own audience because my assumption is we would have more of a board game focused audience and therefore maybe we don't have a lot of people that watch that are fans of Magic the Gathering, even though I know the player base of the Magic the Gathering is huge. Mm-hmm. So my gut would normally say Magic the Gathering easily wins, but I could see if we don't necessarily have a strong following of Magic the Gathering players that one of those other games is going to be able to take it. So my gut says Magic the Gathering, but I guess I'm just curious. But I wouldn't be surprised if something else actually wins.
I like it. I'd like to see a strong upset in here. I'm a big Magic player, but all these games are great. It'll be fun to get into our World Series of games. Ryan,
I think Nick kind of brings up a good point. It'll be interesting kind of the way that we ask people to vote. Like, are we asking people which of these are your personal favorite, or what of these do you think is like the overall best?
However they want to vote.
That's the madness.
That's the madness, yeah. It's going to be however they want to vote, based on popularity, success, or just what their preference is at the time.
Great.
Now, I think out of all these categories in this entire bracket, Magic is probably the strongest 1 seed out of any of the ones that we'll end up doing. But that being said, I do think that there are a couple of sleepers. I think Lorcana has a chance. And I think depending on how many people promote this in terms of the games that they want to see win, any of these could end up. If you shake the Lord of the Rings community, you shake that tree, then that gets a bunch of votes, and it could really influence this. The Soulforge Fusion community is very active online and on the Discord and stuff like that. So if you rattle that tree, you might get a lot of extra votes coming that way as well. But I do think out of all the 1 seeds, we're going to talk about Magic the Gathering is going to be the one easy consensus we'll have across all the categories.
Yep, 100% agree. Be very interesting where we go from there.
Yeah. Well, that was some pretty exciting discussion, and I can't wait to see how the next category goes. So for now, let's throw it back over to Ryan with the nominees for deck building and the hand management category. Ryan, take it away.
This year's nominees for deck building and hand management are Clank in Space by Paul Denon, Direwolf Games, and Renegade Game Studios. Star Wars deck building game, Caleb Grace and Fantasy Flight Games. Dominion, Donald X. Vicarino, Rio Grande Games. Star Realms, Robert Doherty, Darwin Castle, Wise Wizard Games. Legendary, Marvel, Devin Lowe, Upper Deck. Brass, Martin Wallace, and Roxley. Great Western Trail, Alexander Pfister and Eggertspiel. Legendary Encounters Alien, Ben Sichowski, Daniel Mandel, Upper Deck. Concordia, Matt Gertz, Rio Grande Games. Ascension Tactics, Justin Gary, Ryan Sutherland, Stoneblade Entertainment. Mage Knight, Vlada Chivato, and WizKids. Too Many Bones, Josh Carlson, Adam Carlson, by Chip Theory Games. Let's go to the table to see who makes it.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. Let's see what people think here. Another great category of games. I guess personally, games I'm looking to really make it into this bracket are Clank in Space. I don't know how you beat the original deck builder of Dominion. And then we've got some very interesting hand management style games thrown in here with Brass and Great Western Trail. Really curious to see what's going to make the cut down to 8 games here. Nick, anything that really stands out to you that you feel strongly should make it in here, or that's on this list that you just don't feel belongs?
Well, as you already were saying, John, Dominion is like the granddaddy of deck building. I think most would say attributes the mechanism success purely to the success of Dominion. So definitely a strong contender there. In terms of surprises, it's hard for me to say I see any major surprises other than the fact I've never actually played Concordia, and then I hear a lot of people, you guys talk about Brass all the time. I've never actually played Brass, so I don't feel like I'm qualified to touch much on that game. But this is a great category. This is a solid list of games.
Corey, like you mentioned earlier, your collection consists of a lot of these type of games.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Anything you feel doesn't belong, or anything that has to make it?
Well, like Nick just said, Dominion is the granddad of this entire category, and I would be interested to see what your guys' opinions are putting Dominion against Clank, because Clank is technically, in my opinion, a better version of Dominion because it adds a board and a little bit more going on, a little bit more gamery. But then again, I haven't played Dominion for a while. I played the heck out of it years ago, and it is the granddad of it all. So it might be kind of a fun one to see make the bracket just for that reason, to kind of reinvigorate it and see how everybody plays it out. So, but yeah, those two pitted against each other, I think, would be awesome. Too Many Bones is throwing me for a loop.
Yeah, when I looked it up online, BGG does have it as a hand management game, so I like it, and I threw it in this list because I felt it would be able to compete this one better than other ones.
And there's no hand management in Too Many Bones. It's just rolling dice.
It's dice management. Well, your dice are in your hand.
That is my surprise. Too Many Bones.
Well, that's a good point.
Too Many Bones should be knocked off the list right now.
Unfortunately, I think I'm with Corey on that one. Other games I feel like maybe we can cut down on here. We have 2 legendary games on the list. Both, however, are very highly rated. Alien and Marvel, those are huge IPs. What are your guys' thoughts on those games?
I will just say this. Alien is the perfect organism, and I think Legendary Encounters is the perfect game between those two.
That's a bold statement there, right?
Church, what are your thoughts on the 2 legendary games we have on this list?
Well, I actually own Legendary Marvel, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the IP and playing through it, and it's semi-cooperative. But if we have to pick one of these 2, I'm going to side with Ryan and go with the Legendary Encounters. I like the impending doom of the alien and the things you're trying to work towards all collectively. There's a lot of anxiety that's building in that game, and I think if more people played that they would absolutely fall in love with that game. So that's the one between those 2 that I would pick.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Going off the IP popularity, I think Marvel has an edge there, but Alien's massively popular since it first came out. So I think that makes a strong argument for that too.
I will make a comment to that too. So Legendary Encounters, I believe, just came out with the Matrix version of the game as well. So this might kind of reinvigorate or get people excited about the whole Legendary Encounters IP again.
Perfect, yeah, that makes sense. I just feel like having both here is just going to be a disservice to the community, and unfortunately it looks like Legendary Marvel is just not going to make the cut this year. That still leaves us with 2 cuts to make amongst these games. I don't know, I think we can all agree, Clank, huge contender. Dominion, Star Realms, probably a great contender. We've got Legendary Encounters, Alien. Star Wars deck building game, deck building is in the name. However, I don't know how big of a splash that made this year. I would argue it probably wasn't huge. I think me and Church are probably the only ones in this group have played it. That one probably is not a strong enough contender to make the list, in my opinion.
I do think it's worth mentioning because it's a very straightforward 1v1 game. It is really easy to get to the table. It's great for Star Wars fans, but if you're not a fan of Star Wars, you can still jump into the mechanics and understand it really, really quickly and easily and have a good time with it. So I think it's definitely worth mentioning. There are a lot of other games on this list.
Star Realms.
Oh yes, Star Realms I love.
Very similar, probably edges out Star Wars, the deck building game.
Star Realms is one of my favorites in this whole region. So, but I think in terms of Star Wars versus some of the ones that I'm unsure of, like that I haven't played, I think we can defer to the experts on which one of those might be able to make it in over the Star Wars deck building game.
My one reservation with Star Wars deck building is like, I would love to try it sometime. I haven't played it yet, but there's so many IP deck building games. There's the
Power Rangers.
Power Rangers, yeah, I was gonna say, there's Power Rangers, there's Transformers, there's Harry Potter.
There's G.I. Joe.
There is G.I. Joe, yeah, thank you. Those are the ones that immediately.
If you're saying we want to stay more pure with our list.
No. And I'm just saying, like, we have to then say, well, is this one, demonstrably better than all those other IP ones? And that's why I have my doubts around Star
And I'd
Wars.
agree with that. I'd say if you're looking for a game like the Star Wars deck building game, you're going to look to a game like Star Realms.
Mm-hmm.
And
I would agree with that.
Doesn't have quite the portfolio to compete this year. So amongst these kind of other games, Concordia, Ascension Tactics, Mage Knight, Great Western Trail, how well do we think these actually fit the deck building hand management style?
I would say one of my favorite games of all time is Great Western Trail, but I kind of shoehorned it in. It is technically hand management more with the cows. You're trying to get different cows to, before you get to the end of the trail, but I shoehorned it in for this list basically because I love the game so much, so I can definitely see an argument against that one for sure.
And I don't know much about Concordia. Nick, care to tell us more about that?
That wasn't me.
It was Ryan.
Yeah, I nominated Concordia. That will be a perennial on my top 10 list. I think it's great. It's a super tight hand management game. Every player has the exact same starting hand, and it's just kind of what order and how you play your cards as to how well you play in the game. It's
I think that makes it a strong contender in general, just knowing that hand management aspect is such a big staple of the game.
Yeah, it's pure hand management.
I would say for how unsimilar it is to brass, it is also that crucial in some similar ways to your hand management and how crucial each card is that you play in that game.
Yep.
So I really like that pick as well.
Any thoughts on Ascension Tactics or Mage Knights, Nick?
So with Ascension Tactics, the reason why I really enjoy that game is it's one of the few. I mean, and this is starting to become more popular for sure. Is it's a deck builder with a 2D board that's almost equally as important to the gameplay as the deck building mechanic. And Ascension Tactics, of course, being based on the original Ascension deck building game. And I think the integration of a 2D skirmish game with the deck building mechanic of the traditional Ascension game was very well done. I will be the first to admit it's probably not on the radar of a lot of gamers because it's relatively new and hasn't really taken off much, but I do think it has a good future ahead of it. Mage Knight, on the other hand, is a very well-known game. It's typically known for being a great solo game because there's so much analysis paralysis involved, but that's because of the hand management. So therefore, I feel like it's the one of the ideal hand management games because you're literally trying to manage your hand to the best of its ability to optimize the outcome of every single turn. And that's essentially what the game is. It's like hand management expert level because it is a kind of complicated game, but you're getting all sorts of cards and you're managing this like resource as well to upgrade the abilities of your cards. So between those two,
would you rather see Ascension Tactics or Mage Knight?
Yeah, I was gonna say at the end of the day, I think Mage Knight definitely deserves a spot over Ascension Tactics just because Mage Knight's been around a long time. They recently came out with an Ultimate Edition. Again, we talked about in the previous in the category for LCG TCGs, which are the games that have really withstood the test of time. Mage Knight came out many years ago, and now there's this Ultimate Edition showing that it's a game that still is getting a lot of visibility in the hobby board gaming community to justify the print run of an Ultimate Edition. So for sure, Mage Knight, I would say, has the edge over Ascension Tactics.
Corey, I know Great Western Trail is a favorite of yours. I'm still going to give you the benefit of the doubt on this one, but between a game like Great Western Trail and Ascension Tactics, which game do you think better encapsulates a hand management or deck building style?
It's going to break my heart, but I would say Ascension Tactics does fit the bill better.
And I will honestly say, too, I did some research prior to the brackets forming. A lot of people do heavily figure Ascension Tactics as a deck builder more than a miniature skirmish game. So that's why I'm actually not surprised it was in this bracket.
Yep.
So I think that leads us down to our final 8. We've got Clank in Space, Dominion, Star Realms, Brass, Legendary Encounters, Alien Concordia, Ascension's Tactics, and Mage Knight. And honestly, again, I think, although it's not in our personal portfolio of a top game, I think the Dominion's the number one here. I mean, I don't know how you beat out Dominion as
just
a
out of
deck
respect,
builder.
honestly.
Yeah, right.
I think Dominion
Right.
goes number one.
Yep.
And then 2, another very popular games are probably either between Star Realms or Clank. Those are 2.
Those are my 2 favorites from the region, and what I'm thinking who'd come out of this grouping is it'd have to be from one of those 2. So those are my strongest contenders, and I could go either way. I know that a majority of the committee picked Clank in Space as one of the games that should be considered, and I don't know if we have a whole lot of games that so many of the committee had a concise opinion on, so that might default to put Clank in Space as number 2.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
How many of you picked Star Realms for the list?
Oh, I did.
I did too. So, 2-2.
No, Clank in Space was 3.
Oh, I had more.
Yeah,
At 3. Oh,
Yeah.
Well,
That's
Well,
what
to
the
be fair,
majority
I
is.
put Clank Catacombs, but
Yeah.
if you're just
Okay.
saying a Clank game, then 4 of us did.
I forgot to count that,
Yeah.
but yes. Yeah, so yeah, the selection committee did have 4 votes for Clank and 2 for Star Realms. And again, these are huge, I think, well-known deck-building-esque games that I think in this we're going to have to default Clank to 2 and Star Realms to 3.
Yeah.
Yep.
And going off kind of that same vein, I feel like when you're looking at popularity or games that have withstood the test of time, you're maybe even looking at Mage Knight or Legendary Encounters Aliens as top seeds almost.
I think Legendary Encounters has to come next. Ryan, it looks like you've got a strong opinion on that.
I mean, if I'm being honest, I love Legendary Encounters Alien, don't get me wrong, it's also one of my favorite games, but for me, Concordia is
Might be a
kind of
strong
the
one.
better of those.
That's also been around for a long time as well.
Yeah,
correct?
I mean, it's, yeah.
And Concordia has been on the highest of
15 years.
pedestals in all board game.
Yeah.
Oh,
Every-
yeah.
All right.
That's good. That seems
I'm
like
sold.
a strong number 4. Yeah. That make Mage Knight then our number 5? Or are we leaning more towards a 6?
I think almost by default. We haven't ranked Brass yet, though, have we? And that's number 1 on Board Game Geek.
Yeah, that's
Oh, that's
why I
very
asked.
fair.
No,
Very fair. Oh, man.
all right, all
Really
right.
getting
Number one
into
by
movies on
yours
this, yeah.
Well, from last year's.
Okay.
But for the
Feel like it might try to
hand
find me.
management style, I'm sure Brass can fall into multiple categories, and it is number 1 on Board Game Geek. But I would say you could argue it's because of the mixing and the mashing of, say, hand management and city building or tile placement, which maybe it doesn't make it as strong a contender in this bracket. However, maybe that should be our number 5.
I think number 5 is probably an insult if we're talking just the numbers on the popularity of Brass overall.
Yep.
And if this is the category that it's in, then we have to kind of defer to the strength of that. So maybe it should be even higher than 5, honestly, if we're talking about that game is one of the best on BGG.
Should we be flip-flopping this with Concordia?
It's better
Or
than
even
Star
higher?
Realms.
Better than Star Realms, even? Gotta remember, the selection committee did not have multiple nominations for Brass.
Yeah, I find it hard to beat out Star Realms because my wife even got into Star Realms. She's addicted to the app for it, and I think that just shows how broad of a player spectrum Star Realms is.
Same with my wife. She hates attacking games, 1v1, and loves Star Realms.
Yeah.
So.
But the Concordia Brass decision, I would have to default to.
I think we're going to flip-flop on that one. Get Brass up at number 4, Concordia at number 5. I think then you're looking at a game like Mage Knight at 6 with Legendary Encounters and Ascension Tactics right at the bottom, which...
You should put Ascension at 8 because that one's more of a newcomer for sure. Legendary Encounters
has the staying
it has
power, but maybe not the large popularity.
Yeah, and it's got the Legendary family,
right,
which is a very popular deck building family.
Mage Knight was the most surprising game, I think, for me to this list, because not only should it be on the list and it qualifies for the list in all its truest sense, but also because it is so highly regarded as a solo-only game, pretty much. So
yeah.
I was surprised by that, and even coming in up to number 6 there. I mean, yeah, it's a good spot for it, but I would like. I mean, obviously we'll see how it plays out, but I'd love to see how people vote on it.
Agreed. Well, with that, I think that pretty much sets our hand management deck building bracket. Corey, what matchup are you seeing in the first round, or maybe potential matchup out there that's going to be really interesting between some of these games? And who do you think will take this region?
Ooh, boy. I'm looking right here too. I mean, all the matchups are pretty decent. Who's 4 and 5? Brass and Concordia. I think that'll be a real interesting matchup because Concordia has just had the longevity and the mainstay, and just that, like I said, just the highest of pedestals in regards for the game for so many years. And Brass is more of a newcomer to that, where people are now saying that this is just the best game of all time.
But like you said, it is the hottest game right now, so that could be very interesting.
Yeah.
Who do you think is going to take the region?
I think, that's a tough ask. For deck building, hand management, let's go with Clank. I think Clank is going to take the cream on this one.
Nick, what are your thoughts?
I have to say that I'm very interested to see how the Clank versus Mage Knight matchup will go because of the fact that Mage Knight has a very strong, dedicated following. So again, it's up to what kind of voters we're going to get for this. But at the same time, I actually think Star Realms has the largest mass appeal of any game on this list, so I think Star Realms will come out as the winner for this category.
I 100% agree. If I was going to pick a game, I'd also pick Star Realms. I wish it would be Clank, but my gut is telling me Star Realms. Ryan, what do you think?
I mean, if I was up to pick, I'd say Concordia, but I don't think it even probably makes it out of the first round against Brass. But yeah, it'll come down. I think Star Realms or Clank has a lot of appeal. Probably Star Realms if we get a lot of votes. Yeah.
Church, any surprising matchups here, seedings, thoughts on who's going to make it out of this one?
The second round matchup between Clank and Star Realms, that one's tough because those are two of some of my favorite games, some of the games that we love playing together a whole lot. I've played Star Realms with a lot of different groups of people, so like we've all been saying, we really love that game. We'll see if enough voters go out to really support that for multiple rounds, or if a game like Brass, that people that are very knowledgeable about board games and think it's on kind of the highest of high pedestals, if people might just default to vote for that one instead. So I could see that as a dark horse. But yeah, I mean, Clank and Star Realms, those are my two favorites in this region, and I would hope for Star Realms, but like Brass, or possibly if people really get a groundswell behind Clank in space, that might knock it off.
Yeah, agreed. Well, this is going to be a really interesting one. Really curious to see how this bracket for the deck building and hand management category plays out. That concludes our first reveal of the 2024 Talking Cardboard Board Game Championship Bracket. Stay tuned as we continue to reveal more of these categories. Remember, once all the categories have been revealed, we're going to open the brackets up to voting, so people definitely get in there, vote on that first round for the games you want to see progress and potentially make it into our Board Game Championship Series. As always, thank you from everyone at Talking Cardboard, and stay tuned for more.